Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today I have something special for you. In this video, I choose to explore Halo and its 20-year history. 2021 is the 20th anniversary of the Xbox platform and Halo. And I'm going to frame it around the most important aspect of the entire franchise. Not Chief, not the story, not the gameplay, but us. The fans, the developers, the very people that's made Halo what it is, and how Halo's 2-decade-long narrative has influenced and been influenced by us. So let's take a walk through the woods together and take a look behind us so we're more prepared for the path ahead. We'll take a look at the 20 years of Halo's history and how it changed and shifted over the years. I implore you to join me on this walk through the narrative, as the reward at the end is ever the sweeter for the journey. So let's move. The original Xbox was released on November 15th, 2001, at least in North America. It was February 22nd, 2002 in Japan and March 14th, 2002 in Australia and Europe. The console launched with a few titles, but the most significant amongst them was Halo Combat Evolved. While Halo was not an instant runaway success on release, it had a long tail sales rate and a very high attach rate for the Xbox. During the 2 months following Halo's release, the game sold alongside more than 50% of Xbox consoles. 1 million units had been sold roughly 5 months after release, a faster pace than that of any previous 6th generation console game. In spite of a very chaotic development lifecycle which saw Halo and its developer Bungie move from the Mac platform over to Microsoft's brand new, as of yet unproven game console, the Xbox, originally named the DirectX Xbox, the game outshone its less than stellar reviews from game critics who saw its debut announcement at E3 2001 and commented on its broken state, poor frame rates, and technical issues. What they couldn't have known at the time was that the team at Bungie were working tirelessly through every hour that was sent to fix the game and get it shipped in good fashion. After several planned video game tie-ins to Steven Spielberg's film AI, Artificial Intelligence, were scrapped, it became clear that Halo had to serve as the tentpole title for the Xbox, a role which the game was never intended to fill. Again, in spite of these overwhelming odds, the Xbox hit the market, with Halo being sold alongside it as the launch title for the console. And we were given this.
Tube shows green. Cycle complete.
Sorry for the quick thaw, Master Chief.
Keep it up! Hey, careful! Ease up, son!
A deep and immersive campaign narrative, environments that were varied, beautiful, expansive and mystifying, a soundscape that was captivating, awe-inspiring and fantastically composed, and an enemy that was enjoyable to fight. Moreover, the game launched with multiplayer co-op campaign and a system link capable multiplayer. The game struck a chord with the masses and gained in popularity rapidly as the weeks and months post-launch continued to elapse. The multiplayer saw the birth of LAN parties, where dozens of people would come together and network their Xboxes and play massive system-linked multiplayer games surrounded by friends, junk food, and good times. The Xbox Live online service was launched in late 2002, however. It wouldn't be until 2004, with the launch of Halo 2, that the Halo fans would see the game elevate to an online multiplayer game. And with the release of its sequel game, Halo would most definitely be elevated to a point of prominence utterly unseen in the gaming industry. Halo 2 was released and became the highest grossing release in entertainment history, making $125 million in the first day, and became the best-selling Xbox game worldwide. It added to the story, fleshed out the Covenant, introduced new characters, and doubled down on the universe-building aspect of the franchise. Halo 2 only barely shipped with multiplayer, with Halo 2's development being punctuated by crunch burnouts and massive content cuts due to time constrictions, and yet Halo 2 still broke records and sustained a loyal, significantly large online player count for many, many years. Halo's multiplayer became the gold standard and raised the bar on what was expected of an online game. Whenever anyone at the time spoke of online gaming, Halo was inevitably part of that conversation. Halo 2's cliffhanger ending, caused mainly by time restrictions, inevitably paved the way for a sequel, the third act of the Halo story to that point. While the cliffhanger and the split campaign between Chief and the Arbiter was somewhat controversial back in the day, it has aged gracefully and is now looked back upon fondly by large swathes of the Halo community. After a dutiful wait, Marty's piano beckoned the Halo fanbase. Halo's golden age was about to begin. With that simple E-note, Halo 3's tone was set, and released in 2007 to worldwide, critical and commercial success. The game was immensely addictive, the campaign was diverse and varied, the multiplayer redefined the online multiplayer experience once again, and added in custom map and game variant editors in the form of Forge, which itself has become an entire subculture of the Halo franchise. The story tied up the loose ends of Halo 2, with the game's tagline, "Finish the fight," being an all-encompassing statement that held true. The Covenant was broken, the Flood destroyed, and humanity saved from the teetering edge of extinction. Master Chief had set himself as humanity's saviour and took the player on an absolute power trip on his uncompromising march towards victory. Halo 3 doubled down on the records and reputation set by its predecessor. First day of sales, Halo 3 reached $170 million in the US, setting a record for highest gross of video game within 24 hours of its release. The performance beat the previous record setter, Halo 2, which earned the $125 million within 24 hours. Halo 3 became a cult phenomena. It's frequently cited as one of the greatest games of all time. At its peak, Halo 3 could pull in over 2 million unique players on an average 24-hour period. While Halo 3 was the climax of the first trilogy, it was some people's first experience of Halo, while others it was the culmination of a journey that began in 2001 with the release of Halo CE. The game came to define childhoods. The music of Halo to this day sparks memories for those who lived through Halo's golden era. Halo 3 was the culmination of the Halo trilogy, and its golden era came to define childhoods of thousands of people. It redefined and raised the bar on what to expect from console games and multiplayers time and time again, and earned critical acclaim, awards and records that were utterly unseen in the gaming industry before that point. Despite the monumental success of the Halo franchise to this point, Bungie had plans to move on. Lingering dissatisfaction with Bungie's acquisition by Microsoft in 2000 and a desire for more favourable profit sharing on Halo 3 led to an agreement where Bungie would become an independent studio after shipping a set number of new Halo games. Halo's golden era had crested and was now waning. In quick order after Halo 3, we received Halo 3 ODST, a spin-off game that built on the Halo 3 engine, offered a new story, a new hero, and a new pace of gameplay. By April 2009, market research firm OTX reported that ODST was the most highly anticipated video game a spot it continued to hold in late August. Before its release, the title was top-selling game on Amazon.com based on pre-orders alone, spending 107 days atop the merchant's top 100 video games and software list. The game was widely well received by critics and gamers. The new tone and atmosphere of the game was much more tactical and a step away from the space opera scale and cadence of the earlier games. Playing as an ODST presented its own unique pros and cons that needed to be adjusted for in a manner of gameplay. The new tone and style unleashed Marty's creative genius on a film noir, smooth jazz soundtrack that stands alone as a fantastic, masterful expression of the art. Some noted, however, that ODST failed to raise the bar and meet expectations in the same way in which the earlier games had. In this respect, Halo's own reputation was standing in the way. Halo 2 and Halo 3's launches had broken records, fetched awards, and had been defining and raising the bar of the field of gaming palpably for years, and ODST failed to carry that same power. However, this did not outwardly make ODST a failed game. The tone changes, explorative film noir nighttime in an abandoned city feel made it stand out against many of the other A-list FPS titles released the same year, and is a game that has aged beautifully. Halo ODST still presented a fantastic multiplayer experience in three regards. First, the new Firefight game mode was playable over Xbox Live with others, allowing up to 4 players to fight in staged firefight battles for as long as they could stay alive. Campaign made a return as online co-op campaign, just as it did with Halo 3, and finally the game shipped with a second disc that contained the multiplayer mode with the complete set of Halo 3 maps, allowing players to have all Halo 3 maps, including maps from game content downloads, giving Halo 3's multiplayer servers a second boost in popularity. On top of this, owners of the game received an invitation to participate in the Halo Reach multiplayer beta, which went live on May 3rd, 2010. Reach was to be the final game Bungie was to develop for Microsoft for the Halo franchise before leaving and moving on to new titles. Halo Reach is arguably one of the fan-favourite games from the franchise, and for good reason. Bungie implemented everything that they had learned from their decade of developing the Halo franchise and created a gritty, raw, ultimately doomed story and centered it around a dynamic team of Spartans as they uncover a massive, hidden invasion force of Covenant troops on Reach and work to counter the invasion at all costs. The multiplayer built upon the massively successful implementation of the Firefight mode that debuted in ODST and gave players a massive range of customization for the staged battles, allowing players to tailor the experience as they saw fit. The competitive and social multiplayer made a return with a diverse set of maps, including a massive, sprawling playspace specifically tailored for forgeable maps. The Forge system from Halo 3 had been heavily overhauled and offered players levels of map editing and creation unparalleled in previous versions of the concept. Halo Reach also offered one of the most diverse player customization systems ever implemented in a Halo game and saw players create characters every bit as unique as the players themselves. Halo Reach made $200 million in the first day of sales, a record for the franchise. Its strong sales suggested to analysts that core titles in the holiday season could reverse sluggish video game sales in 2010. In its first 16 days, the game sold $350 million worth of merchandise and premiered at the top of Xbox 360 and multi-platform charts in most territories. With the completion of Halo Reach, Bungie had fulfilled its contractual obligations and left the Halo franchise behind, moving on to new frontiers and their own IPs. In their wake, the franchise was taken over by 343 Industries, an assembly of ex-Bungie employees, Microsoft employees, and new blood brought in from various franchises across the gaming world, and with it, the promise of the franchise's continued development and innovation was seemingly secured. On February 5th, 2010, it was reported that Xbox Live support for the original Xbox games would be discontinued as of April 14th, 2010. Services were discontinued on schedule, but a group of 20 gamers continued to play for almost a month afterwards by simply leaving their consoles on, connected to Halo 2. Bungie left the franchise, and it was now up to 343 Industries to carry the Crownstone franchise of the Xbox platform. This first kicked off with a 10-year anniversary remaster of Halo CE, which launched 10 years to the very day after the original Halo CE on the 15th of November 2011. Halo CE Anniversary delivered the original Halo CE with a graphical revamp that the player was able to switch between. There were, however, many technical issues. In the first instance, the version of Halo CE that was used as the base wasn't the original Halo CE from the Xbox released in 2001, but a Gearbox PC port of the game. This was a choice made to be able to fully facilitate multiplayer, as the original Xbox iteration of the game didn't support online play, due to Xbox Live not being available until 2004 for the Halo franchise. This also enabled the game to ship with the Halo Reach multiplayer and a new map pack which seamlessly reintroduced players to the waning player count of Halo Reach at that point. The implementation of new graphics over the top of the original presented a variety of bugs, including failed bump maps for textures, resulting in the original graphics looking worse than they actually were back in 2001, although the ability to switch between was a point that critics were in favour of. On top of this, while the newer graphics were quite well received, there were aspects that fans looked upon less favourably. In particular, the flood levels such as 343 Guilty Spark and the library, where colours, detail and lighting detracted from the overarching horror-like narrative of these levels. Halo CE Anniversary was 343 Industries' first shipped product since taking over the franchise, and while it was generally well received, Halo fans were still expecting more. 343 Industries, however, were already getting ready to launch the next significant game of their tenure, Halo 4 and the Return of the Chief. But this didn't stop something akin to mass exodus, where Halo players' count dwindled and has yet to recover to its fullest capacity. Halo 4 saw Chief's story pick up where Bungie had left off in 2007. Chief wakes up aboard the Forward Unto Dawn and quickly gets to work with his AI companion Cortana. It isn't long, however, until some problems present themselves. Cortana is reaching the end of her operational lifespan and is beginning to show the signs of rampancy, a degenerative condition that causes AIs to become fatally inoperable and a liability to themselves and those around them. Resolved to get Cortana back to her and his own creator, Dr. Halsey, Chief focuses and applies himself to the task of getting home. They end up stranded on a Forerunner shield world, going against a fanatical Covenant remnant and Forerunner AI forces known as Prometheans. An ancient evil awakens and Chief finds that he is able to rely upon Cortana less and less, her condition becoming ever more severe as the battles go on, culminating in a sacrifice that sees Chief detonating a nuclear device and Cortana dying to save him from the blast, leaving him floating in space. Players received this newer, more mature story well. However, many took issue with the game's much more linear, limited playstyle, with some commenting that the campaign felt like a limited gameplay followed by pressing a button to be able to go somewhere else, for more limited gameplay followed by yet more button pressing followed by yet another waypoint. In similar fashion, the new emotional tone and the development of Chief and Cortana's character arcs was a critically acclaimed point. The story had matured and was wrestling with mortality, morality, ethics, love and attachment, duty and honour. However, the gameplay fell short of the franchise's innovative reputation. It delivered a solid play experience, but one that was pretty much guaranteed from any other modern shooter at the time. Away from this, the game brought a new dynamic multiplayer that was more in line with modern shooters, and while it initially had a very high player population, the player count quickly bled off. Firefight returned in a very different manner. Spartan Ops was a means for players to deal with a firefight sort of game style in a more mission and objective focused way. It was not necessarily received anywhere near as positively as Firefight had been on previous titles. Halo 4's player retention was also suffering. Although Halo 4 had nearly 2 million play hours at launch, within a month those levels had fallen to in line with Halo Reach, and quickly fell off below those levels only 16 weeks after launch. Halo 4 grossed $220 million on its launch day and $300 million in its opening week. The gross was a new record for the franchise, surpassing Halo Reach's $200 million first day gross. More than 1 million people played Halo 4's multiplayer within the first 24 hours of release. While Halo 4 debuted at the top of the UK video game chart and became the 18th biggest launch ever in the UK, it failed to beat the week 1 sales record of Halo 3 and Halo Reach. In hindsight, players look back on Halo 4 with fondness and appreciate the game for what it is. In my own opinion, the more mature storyline and the exploration of Chief's humanity and the difficult moral and ethical debates surrounding the peripheral story were a refreshing change to the previous titles. I do, however, accept that the gameplay felt like, go here, press this button, go there, press this button. Again, in hindsight, it now makes sense. Halo 4 was absolutely gorgeous. Its graphics were fantastic, its attention to detail and realism was exceptional, and its use of lighting and motion capture for cutscenes gave the entire story a more real and grounded feel. However, you have to consider that this was a game developed for the Xbox 360. It was effectively using the same hardware that Halo 3 had been using back in 2007. If you consider then that the beautiful aesthetics we expect from such a title had to still be rendered by this hardware, it makes sense that the compromises had to be made somewhere. This then somewhat negatively impacted Halo 4's campaign in the same way that they had throttled Bungie's ambitions for Halo 2 on the original Xbox. The beauty of the game and its impressive graphical capability had forced the game to be more constrained in its scope, scale, and spectacle. Large open areas were sacrificed, leaving tight internal spaces with limited tactical options for each given enemy engagement. This served to make the campaign feel much more linear and made the player feel constrained and forced to tackle situations in a very limited and specific way. While Halo 4 had underdelivered in some regards, it had drawn new people to the franchise, and with time has become a game that fans appreciate for the depth of story and implementation of a more militarized design aesthetic. But bigger troubles were still yet to surface. In 2014, to honour the 10-year anniversary of Halo 2, 343 Industries released Halo, the Master Chief Collection. Not only was this a graphical revamp of Halo 2, giving the same anniversary treatment as they did 3 years earlier with Halo CE, but it doubled down on the innovations of this process and learned from the previous incarnation of an anniversary title and delivered a shining success of a remaster of Halo 2. The graphics honoured the original design aesthetic, the lighting added mood and tone to the levels without detracting from the ambience. The soundtrack delivered a renewed vigour to the legendary original soundtrack scored by Marty O'Donnell. On top of this, MCC launched with Halo CE Anniversary, Halo 3 and Halo 4. All Master Chief titles were incorporated into this single platform, with every game engine running in parallel, able to render each game exactly as it was at the launch on a single title. That was the plan, at least. At launch, many players experienced problems with online matchmaking modes. 343 Industries released numerous updates to address these issues, and by way of an apology, ODST was offered as a free downloadable content for any who played between release and December 2014. The prominent matchmaking issues that prevented players from playing online multiplayer modes on release day continued for many months, as 343 worked tirelessly on patches to fix these issues. The trouble therein being that the MCC was effectively 5 separate game engines, 2 of which being anniversary games with effectively 2 graphics engines running within each respective game, all running on a single UI. When problems were repaired in one game engine, it occasionally caused issues with others. After a lot of frustration for the fans, and more than a few headaches for 343, MCC finally got past its launch issues and became a fully playable experience, as it was originally intended. However, by this point, many critics had called the game flat out broken, with some even saying it could well be the worst major game release in a decade. This likely damaged the reputation of the game and the franchise image as a whole, causing many to call into question if 343 were out of their depth, and that the franchise perhaps should have ended when Bungie parted ways with Microsoft. This, of course, is an eventuality I am glad that did not happen, and the MCC story was really only just getting started, and the best of it was yet to come. However, there was one final release on 343's agenda before we catch up with events and revisit the MCC. On March 22nd, 2015, we were blessed with the launch of Hunt the Truth, an audio play that played out a beautifully crafted narrative to tie into the launch of Halo 5 Guardians. The first season followed the investigations of fictional journalist and war photographer Benjamin Gerard, who investigates the Master Chief's background. Gerard discovers that the official story of Master Chief's origins are false and attempts to expose the cover-up. We got expressive exposition of the origins of the Master Chief and how he is perceived by the masses as humanity's saviour. We get a deep, insightful look into the lives of ordinary people in a utilitarian future where information is filtered and manipulated by the Office of Naval Intelligence. The first season was highly successful, drawing an audience of 6.7 million listeners on iTunes and winning Hunt the Truth's ad agency a Clio Award. A second season of the podcast began on September 22nd, 2015, focusing upon the viewpoint of the Oni agent Maya Sankar, returning undercover as Pharaoh to investigate unidentified attacks on human colonies. It sets the stage that Master Chief has gone rogue and may be responsible for the attacks on the colonies. I, for one, as a fan, would have loved to fight as the Master Chief against humanity if needed. The idea of a genuine AWOL story, where Chief has a higher purpose or strategy in mind and has to accomplish it even if humanity and the UNSC at large do not understand his motivations and even attempt to actively stand in his way. If Chief is going rogue, I'm with him till the end. The level of excitement in the fanbase for the potentials of this story were palpable, and the community was alive with theories and hype and ideas. The story presented to us here, however, wasn't quite what we received. 343 Industries had a big obstacle to climb with Halo 5. After the player base of Halo 4 practically evaporated and the MCC launched with all of the problems that it did, Halo 5 needed to be a success. The franchise returned to the fundamentals of what made it great in the first place, while also bringing the gameplay and dynamics into the modern era with enhanced movement and more engaging gunplay. It was a bigger game than previous entries, with the scope and scale of the levels and maps being immensely larger than in any previous title. The graphics were beautiful, the settings and locations large, sprawling and awe-inspiring, and the vistas breathtaking. In bringing Halo into the modern era, however, it inadvertently changed the dynamics of what made Halo so unique in the first place. This was a shift that some fans found extremely jarring, while others adapted to the new dynamic. The story we got, while it did have Chief going rogue, the lengths at which he did were at odds with what was suggested in Hunt the Truth. On top of this, while it was a split campaign between Chief and Blue Team and Locke and Fireteam Osiris, it leaned heavily towards Osiris, giving them the majority of levels and gameplay, leaving fans of the Chief somewhat dissatisfied. The reliance on the gameplay to be based around a co-op experience also stunted the opinions of the solo players, who found boss encounters and even some stage battles particularly frustrating, given that instant kills could be dealt with no warning, even on normal difficulty, by the enemies, and the friendly AI was often slow at responding to commands and in some cases didn't revive players before the countdown timer expired. The campaign was no doubt tooled towards co-op play, and that meant that AI and difficulty curve was based around the idea of co-op play versus the solo play experience that most Halo fans were accustomed to. Couple this with very few quiet moments where a player could stop and reflect and take in the expertly crafted vistas, the game felt like the player's actions did nothing to influence the plot. Instead, the player was just there for the ride. Cutscenes often faded out without feeling finished, and while the campaign plot had promise, the game ended on a cliffhanger at a point that could be considered the end of the first act. This all added to frustration to the player experience. Multiplayer, on the other hand, was worlds apart. Halo 5's multiplayer experience was praised for being the best shape Halo's multiplayer has ever taken. The game's return to universal weapon loadouts and obtaining stronger weapons spawning on map, rather than unlocking weapons as in Halo 4, was also a point of strong praise. Warzone mode was considered to be one of the best new ideas in both the Halo franchise and the genre, and its multiplayer online battle arena-like mechanics and vast environments being fan favourites. Its dynamicism is lauded by casual and hardcore players alike, whereby Warzone isn't so much about consistency, it's about adaptability, and the team that can adapt on the fly and strike when opportunity knocks will ultimately have the upper hand. Halo 5 then was a polar switch to Halo 4, where Halo's 4 campaign narrative was praised and its multiplayer lacking, while Halo 5's campaign narrative was knocked and its multiplayer praised. Halo 5 has and continues to draw a strong weekly player base, and is the feature of professional competitive play in the Halo Championship series, and continues to be a massive success for the franchise. 343 took this win and were about to double down with the Master Chief Collection before moving on to their next big project. At this late stage in the game, 343 had a rocky history with the franchise, and the games it had released thus far had been very much hit and miss. Interest in the Halo franchise waned, with it never really building to the cadence and presence that the earlier games secured for the franchise. However, 343 made the conscious move to collate and consolidate their efforts. MCC was given an overhaul. Its problems from its launch were now a distant memory, and on top of this, the entire Master Chief Collection was to be ported to PC. The games available now included Halo CE Anniversary, Halo 2 Anniversary, Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, Halo Reach, and Halo 4, all under a single boot. Games that were not Anniversary Editions were given frame rate and graphical boosts, and the multiplayer for the first time ever would be cross-playable between PC and console. 343 had delivered the penultimate Halo experience by releasing all of the major games as a single package to Xbox and PC users, with all of the major functional bugs fixed. Even now, incremental updates are leading to more and more of the less immediate bugs to be fixed, with old game glitches being re-implemented into Halo 2, such as sword flying and the long broken bump map textures for Halo CE being lined up to be fixed in due course, restoring the original Halo CE graphics to pretty much exactly in line with how the game originally shipped back in 2001. MCC was finally, at long last, a shining example of a Halo experience. Due to the many complications to the many releases under 343 Industries' tenure during this time, many began to doubt the resolve of 343 to be able to deliver a quintessentially Halo-style game. MCC had finally become what it was intended to be, but damage had already been done. By the time MCC got to PC, we already knew about Halo Infinite, and while the few examples of content we got from Halo Infinite showed a more immediately recognisable and iconic Master Chief design, as polar opposites to what we saw in Halo 4 and Halo 5, many were still doubtful that the Infinite we were seeing in the trailers was the Infinite we would ultimately get. Something that I think we as fans must understand is that while we grow emotionally connected to the franchise and enjoy Halo and what it has to offer and become committed to its continued success, 343 Industries and Bungie before them owe us absolutely nothing. They do not owe us explanations on their motivations. They do not owe us justification for changes. They do not owe us a damned thing. So the fact that they go out of their way to communicate with the community and articulate the decisions as best they can, and change things if the overwhelming majority say that they dislike a certain aspect. It is a gift we too often overlook as a right. From a developer's perspective, you have to understand we, and bear in mind by we I mean the community as a whole, including the vocal minorities and the silent majorities, for good or for bad, we have made irrational demands over the years on what we want from the Halo games. While no game that they have released since taking over the franchise has been bang on perfect at launch, simultaneously no game they have released has been a failure. There have been exceptional innovations and developments for the franchise, as much as there have been frustrating glitches and stagnations in dynamicism. Halo 4, Halo 5, the Anniversaries and MCC have not been bad games. They are not bad games. They have had their teething issues, of course, but have overwhelmingly positive aspects that have driven the games forward since their launch. And you have to bear in mind that although some of the people at 343 Industries are seasoned vets and once worked with Bungie, really when you take the majority of the people that are working with 343 Industries now, it is effectively a mishmash of different people. It is a completely and utterly new company. A new company that has taken over an already well-established IP and have taken on the mantle of responsibility, so to speak, in order to develop this franchise. A franchise that's, although not set in stone in its art style and its gameplay mechanics, is still something that is instantly recognisable to the average fan. In the past, we've asked for something new, but something old at the same time. We've asked for something the same, but different. We want familiarity, but novelty. We want the old, but it has to be new. We like Locke and Osiris, but we want more of Chief. We want humanity to be a powerhouse, but we also want them to be the underdogs. We want armor abilities, but we don't want armor abilities because then they're not available all of the time. We prefer them to be available all the time, similar to advanced movement mechanics, but we also don't want it to feel too much like Titanfall. This minefield of contradicting wants and needs makes it nearly impossible for a developer to create a product that everyone will enjoy. And although I can't pinpoint when or how it happened, for some reason when Bungie were developing Halo, we just kind of accepted what they gave us. Of course there was the odd thing here and there that the community as a whole would speak out against or for, and then Bungie would kindly implement that certain change, but it seems much more rife with 343 Industries. Back in Bungie's day, if we didn't like it, we just kind of learned to live with it. Why then do we treat 343 differently and ask that they change this, that and the other? Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't speak up about something that bothers us. Of course, constructive feedback is imperative to the development process. But just blindly yelling, change this because Halo, I don't like this, I don't want this, make it this because reasons, just doesn't cut the mustard. It isn't constructive, and is often a knee-jerk reaction without the full information available. This is not a universal truth, I know. When 343 announced it would be delaying the release of Halo Infinite, it was met with overwhelming positivity. The community rallied behind that decision and spurred them on. Hell, when people found out that Reach was being put into the MCC, fans started sending pizza to 343 Industries as a thank you. It got to such extremes, Brian Gerard had to formally ask people to stop because the quantity of pizza was becoming overwhelming. We need to temper our response to things that we don't like. But I get it, we're only human. We need to rein in our impulses for immediate and overwhelming negative rebukes. But again, I get it, we're only human. Pause, and wait for more information before jumping to conclusions and defaulting to outrage. Again, this is exemplified when they announced armor coatings for Halo Infinite and how the standard primary-secondary colouring system were being supplanted, rather than wait for more information to make a logical judgment on the results, which, bear in mind, although we have received some more information, we haven't actually seen how it's implemented yet. Rather than waiting, the response from the community was overwhelmingly negative, and in the past, things have been significantly worse. And remember, this isn't only damaging to 343 Industries as the franchise developer, but to the employees who are literally slogging away under extraneous conditions, considering the pandemic that we've seen in recent months, but it's also damaging to Halo and thus, us. Changes that have been implemented as per the requests or demands of the community have irrevocably damaged the experience for some of the fanbase. Tailoring to the vocal minority, for example, means the silent majority get, well, quite frankly, shit all over. It takes an extraordinarily well-tempered developer to know when to take something as legitimate feedback and when to take it as a vocal minority getting their whinge on. We have doubted. We have raged. We have argued. We have reacted and overreacted. But we did so because we're human, because we care about Halo and because Halo means something to all of us. It's not just a game, but a means of relaxation, of excitement, of being quintessentially human, of being together. Halo is significant because it holds a mirror up to us while showing us what we could be, what we could do if we have a common goal, a mutual objective, a joint mission. And if we just realize how powerful we can be when we work together and what we can achieve, there is literally nothing that we can't do together. Why do I bring this up? Because 343 are making Halo for us. 343 were conceived and appointed to ensure Halo continued after Bungie left. They are doing this for us. Yes, they're doing it for profits too, but that's because the market exists because we, the fans, were not ready to say goodbye to Halo. We were not ready for Halo to end. The demand was there, so the plans were laid to secure Halo's future for us. And we respond to the things they wrong with a self-assured sense of entitlement? No. 343 have no obligations to us. But they do have a desire to commit to the franchise and develop it for and with us. And only when both the franchise developer and the fanbase communicate effectively do incredible things happen. And I'm not alone in the opinion that the way in which Halo Infinite has shifted and the things that have been altered based on well-articulated feedback to the franchise is a clear indication that we as the fans and 343 Industries can and do work extremely well together to push the Halo universe forward. It is a joint effort of 343 and Bungie before them and us, the fans, that has shaped Halo into what it is. This has only been achievable because we did it together. We built Halo. Bungie laid the foundation, expanded the lore and gave us a story, an experience. Gave us weapons to destroy and gave us tools to build. And with them we fought battle after battle, defeated innumerable quantities of enemies, saved humanity hundreds of thousands of times over. We trained with each other, honed our skills, developed ourselves, became better people. But then we did something unexpected, something huge. We took what we loved and we made it real. We took a game and brought it to life. Just as science fiction is influenced by reality, we have influenced our reality with science fiction. People have built cosplay armor, weapons, both props and real. People have made artwork, programs, gadgets, devices, products that are all derived from Halo, a video game that has rendered into reality. Moreover, the social nature of the game has transfigured into our daily lives. We attended events, we met with people from half a world away that we once would never have even knew existed. We developed lasting friendships, brotherhoods, sisterhoods, relationships, love, families. There have been feuds, there have been romances. There have been lives brought into existence due to the common love for Halo. There are people alive who are only alive because their parents met playing Halo. Do you understand the significance of that? The profundity of life, the very potential that a child possesses, and how that potential is manifest and can affect the very course of existence, how the influence of a single significant individual can adversely affect the quality of life for all of humanity has happened because two people met playing a video game. The co-intellects of clever people who found each other via the pre-game lobbies of Halo can and will develop technologies that can fundamentally change how people live their lives, given the opportunity. 343 took the mantle of responsibility and followed in Bungie's footsteps, guided by the very will of the fans. They expanded on everything that made Halo, Halo. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but every single step of the way was honed from a rough, formless hunk of potential to a specified form, shape, and character, and we now stand at the tipping point of something magnificent. From the 20 years of experience, trial and error, design and implementation, testing, refinement, feedback and reiteration, Halo is about to become what it was always meant to be. The only reason that we find ourselves in this position is because we did it together. And for all of us, together, infinite awaits. Halo has for long meant so much to so many, bringing people together from across the world. Lives that would once have lived, grown old, and ended without so much as knowing each other even existed at all are now intertwined and share common memories. An unspoken understanding and shared past that transcends the boundaries of time and space. Due to a game, we lived, we connected, we loved, we learned, we brought meaning and purpose to each other's lives, together. Its reputation for a masterful expression of the arts, the passions, hearts and minds of all those who helped create the universe, all of us who filled it with life, together, we made it more than just a game. Time continues its inevitable march forward, and for reasons a many, one by one, we've departed Halo and found ourselves seated in the realities of normal life, for better or for worse. The world is full of potential for immeasurable good, prosperity and value, and potential for more hurt, pain and chaos than seems fathomable for a single person to shoulder. But in the good times and the bad, just as we learned side by side in Halo, we rise, we stand, and we fight together. Halo was a place where we grew, where we escaped from the harsher realities of life and created worlds of possibilities for our own, a place we could play and build and share and grow together.
Together. Okay, big guy.
While life offers us value and purpose, everyone needs a retreat from time to time, a place to reunite with their inner selves and those who shared that beautiful space between spaces, a place to be together, now as we approach the 20-year anniversary of Halo CE and the birth of a franchise. We celebrate not only a 2-decade-long history of the game we all fell in love with, but of the Xbox platform and the loyal friends we've made along the way. We celebrate us, and as our friends lists stand as beautiful epitaphs to days long since past, our brothers and sisters in arms missing in action for the better part of a decade, we are reminded of those sacred days, of the lives we once lived as fabled super soldiers of the UNSC. Together, we stand on the dawn of a new era. Our waypoint is set for Halo Infinite, and as Halo turns 20 years old, so Halo Infinite will start it anew. Let this be the time that the promise of new adventures, new missions, new struggles and new stories beckon us from our slumber and welcome us back into the fold as Spartans return into the field of battle. Let us face this new dawn as we faced so many battles in our collective past. Together.
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 Together. Chief, out.